Hello everybody, this is Runray as always. I look so cute with my makeup smeared like this. um uh Cat cam. I need to take off this makeup and it's right there. I do need to get the paper towels. But I wanted to talk about the stuff going through my head right now, so I guess consider this a vent session, but it's going to be on a specific topic. But I don't know. I woke up to everything being within the same topic. I know that's an algorithm, but I don't know. It has to do with womanhood, and it has to do with parenting, and it has to do with childhood, and it has to do with health and emotional recovery. So I like to joke around when people accuse me of having daddy issues and they ask me stuff like how old were you when your dad left you and stuff like that. I like to joke around that I had too many dads to have daddy issues. Um, for those of you who don't already know, I had one birth father. Then at 5 years old, my mom remarried. Then at 11, she divorced my stepdad, who then adopted me and my sibling. She remarried. I moved in with her. My sibling stayed behind with our adoptive stepdad. And after that, my newer stepdad passed away the same year as my adoptive stepdad while I was pregnant with my first child. We'll get more into that later. After that, my mom remarried again before passing away herself. So I have a surviving stepdad who did not raise me. He became my father when I was 26? 25? Was I still 24? It was somewhere between 24 and 25. He became my dad, and he walked me down the aisle the same day he married my mom. I got married to the person who is now my ex-wife, and he got married to my mother in the same ceremony on the same day, and we saved money that way. And he's a great dad. He is a boomer, so he definitely has some generational trauma. I don't believe he graduated high school. However, he was a prolific tradesman throughout his life and is now successfully retired and living comfortably. So he was not as much of a deadbeat as my bio dad or my second stepdad, but he is not the one who raised me. I feel like that's an important distinction to make. Um, Both because it could have gone better if he was the one to raise me, and because our relationship now could be worse if he was the one to raise me. Who knows? Or it could have been both of those things at the same time, you know? Who knows what would have happened if somebody didn't step on a butterfly that day, if he understands the reference. So, um, I like to joke that I have too many dads to have daddy issues. However, there's two caveats to that I need to point out because, I'm me and therefore I'm the person who's going to be able to roast myself the most thoroughly. I definitely have mommy issues. Just because I don't date older women does not mean I do not have mommy issues. Um, I'm going to say a scary word, and you're going to jump to a conclusion, and I'm going to have to explain that the conclusion you jump to is wrong. My mother put me through emotional incest. There was nothing sexual going on between me and my mother. Well, she never did anything physically sexual with me. There was no physical sexual contact between me and any of my parents. However, emotional incest doesn't have to be sexual. That being said, I came to terms with the fact that I survived emotional incest. And then I got sober and I made new friends. And I found out that I did not have the healthiest boundaries when it comes to PG-13 settings. You know? Where it's a mixed crowd of adults and teenagers. And so I said something that when I was a teenager, my mother would easily say in front of me and have no repercussions. And the guy running the stream would say, "Hey, that's a little inappropriate. Please not on my stream." And from that, I inferred that I was inappropriate in a way that I did not expect to be inappropriate. And if you're wondering what exactly it is, I said it was not directed towards a child or anything, don't worry. We were talking about the difference between 6'7" and 69. And I was saying 6'7" is so much better of a meme because it's not sex-based, therefore you don't feel perverted for making the joke. And I followed it up by saying that somebody else said 69 is so overrated as a meme. And I replied, it's not even a good sex position anyway, which is something my mother easily would have said in front of me. And he's like, "Hey, can you please not talk about sex on my stream? Thank you." And I was like, holy shit. He's right. I did just talk about sex in front of a crowd where there may not have been everybody over 18. I forget if any kids were there that particular day or not. But who knows? They could have been lurking, you know? And I have seen people make sex jokes that are literally just jokes and nothing go wrong and it be fine. And I have chosen to avoid making any sex-based jokes in that setting because that conversation made me realize that the boundaries I had been set up with growing up were not the best. And my mother was not the best mother. I can't remember a lot of my childhood. I do remember one emotionally incestuous conversation in particular. And it was non-sexual. My mother was a physician assistant, and she worked for a gastroenterologist. I'm trying to make sure I don't say any identifying details. Isn't that sad? That I'm the one trying not to break HIPAA for my mother? We'll get to that. Let me let my dog in real quick. Okay, kitty cam. After racking my brain further, what I'm about to share is not a HIPAA violation, because after this conversation, the patient himself announced it. So I'm not about to disrespect the dead by sharing this. My mother came to me. I was 16 or 17 years old. Um, she came to me and she said she has a patient who is terminal. He has a rare type of cancer of some anatomy that gastroenterology covers. I forget. Um, and she still had to break the news to him. And she was coming to me to ask for advice because I was a smart kid and I was really emotionally intelligent. She didn't use that exact wording, but that is what she was seeking from me. And so I asked her a few questions, and I said, well, you can tell him that he has a rare opportunity to help others through his death. That before he passes away and even afterwards, his body will be used to advance the treatment of this particular cancer. And even though it will not save him, his sacrifice will save others. So she was right. I was good at it, but that was the way that she went with. She agreed that was the best way to break the news to him, and that is how she broke the news to him. And when he got the news, he basically immediately, within weeks, announced on his radio station that he was going to be passing away soon, and how to make preparations and all that, you know. But I was 16 or 17. I can't remember if it was before or after I went to Harbor Point. But it was after we moved into um, the house that basically, when I moved in with my mother after the second divorce, she had married a man who lived in a dilapidated a trailer home, a mobile home. It was so dilapidated and so old, it was illegal to move it. Because after so many decades, you can no longer move it without causing structural damage. My room in particular had some sort of black colored mold that was eating through the, what do you call it, the floorboards underneath the carpet. And underneath the window frame, you could not step. So they put my bed over it. Because if you stepped on it, you would fall through the floor. And after my mom married him, she got back into the medical industry, and using that funding, we got a house with 10 acres. We got a sweet deal on it because the previous owner was allowed to keep their horses on the land as long as they took care of them themselves. So we were renting out our land to the previous owner in exchange for less on the mortgage. I don't know how they worked that out, but that was what was told to me. We were in that house when she asked me. So I was at least 16. I thought this was normal before, but now that I'm reconsidering everything that I've ever considered to be normal, let me know if this was just my generation at large going through this, or if this was my household in particular going through this. But um, before I graduated from kindergarten, I was already watching Family Guy with my family. When I was 6 years old, I don't really complain about this because, it's just a game. And I don't see horror movies as abuse. I don't see horror games as abuse either. I mean, obviously, if you know your kid can't handle it and you force them to watch, that would be abuse. But that's not what's going on. I was a very willing participant in the horror category. And some kids are into horror. So I don't see it as abuse that my family allowed me to be into horror. But I do think there should have been some parental guidance to go along with the selection of video games I was allowed to play on the PS2. I joke about it all the time that Final Fantasy XII made me gay or bisexual, whichever you want to call it. I am bisexual, however, I identify with the term gay and lesbian. Um, I think when your 5 or 6 year old is showing interest in scantily clad women in bunny ears, you should step in and give them some parental guidance. What else? I also played wrong letter. Yes. Silent Hill 2. I played Silent Hill 2. I beat it the first time when I was 6 years old. I did not notice at the time how sexual it was. There's one scene in particular where they simulate a assault between Pyramid Head and one of the mannequins. And if you haven't played Silent Hill 2, the mannequins are just legs. It's a pair of legs down here, and then for the torso upwards, it's another pair of legs. It was either that or it was one of the nurses, the bubblehead nurses. And I didn't notice at the time that they were more scantily clad than any other game I played. But apparently, looking back, that game was about sexual frustration in the main character. There were themes of assault and incest throughout the game. Angelica, or whatever her name is, there's a character who was horrifically abused growing up by her father and relives her trauma during one of the minor boss battles that you have to fight throughout the game. Yeah, my parents just gave me games and let me play them. What can I say? I think boomers, in particular, were ill-equipped to handle parenting digital natives. And while my parents, in particular, were particularly technologically literate, that does not mean that they did not have their shortcomings. And that's not a moral failing. It just means that what worked for them did not work any longer, and it was not the most obvious to them that it did not work any longer. There's all sorts of things my parents went through growing up that are illegal now, you know? Like being in the back of a car without a car seat. In the 60s, they would just roll around in the back. No seats at all. Seats were for the driver. So there was a driver and a passenger seat, and then an open floor plan in the back. And the kids would just roll around. Of course, cars were slower back then. But I find that no matter who you are, no matter what generation you're from, everybody has a particular favorite logical fallacy. Mine, uh, I in particular, as someone diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, there we go. Uh, I have a awareness that I am sadistic socially in certain settings. I'm sure plenty of people have seen me reply to people who are not arguing in good faith, leaving hateful comments, you know, and I'm not the nicest to them. And my favorite logical fallacy, you may have noticed, is the false dichotomy. I like to say stuff like, did you not understand the joke, or are you just illiterate? I know, strong words. But this is in reply to people who the one I can think of off the top of my head, the video was titled Eyeshadow Fail. She watched it to the end and said, what a waste of time. Because I didn't finish the look? I don't know. She didn't elaborate. It was not good constructive criticism. It was just tone deaf, what do you call it? Heckling. You know, it wasn't constructive. It did not help me. It did not tell me what she wanted to see. Nothing. All it said is a negative perception of what I had posted. When in the title, I tell you I fail. So I asked her, did you not read the title, or are you illiterate? Like, did you choose not to read the title, or are you unable to read the title? I figure if you don't want me to dish it out, don't dish it out yourself. If you can't take it in, don't dish it out. There are much more hateful comments I have received on YouTube than that. But more recently, I have chosen to be nicer even when people are mean to me, because I know I can. I know I can be clever when I'm being mean. We've established that. I want to see how clever I can be while still being nice. I want to learn how to be passive aggressive like my mother. So, what else was I going to talk about? Parenting. I have 2 kids. I'm trying to decide which one to tell you about first. They have very unique circumstances. I'll just start in chronological order. My daughter. I, with help from my mother, escaped human trafficking the day after Thanksgiving, November of 2021. In January of 2022, I had my daughter. Through a mixture of false and real contractions, I was in labor for a week with no relief, except for what we could do at home, which included hot baths so hot that they were not following the obstetrical guidelines. Obstetric, you know what I mean. The pregnancy guidelines for how hot you can have a bath. I exceeded that temperature to seek relief from the excruciating pain of an unprepared labor. After a week of false and real contractions, I was finally admitted to the labor ward and given an epidural, and I got who knows how many hours of sleep. I felt like, I don't know, I got there like in the wee hours of the morning, like barely light outside, and then I want to say I gave birth. It was like just barely starting to get dark out. So sometime between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., I fell asleep after getting the epidural. Um, then the doctor woke me up and said it's time to push. And in 4 pushes, she was out. My mom was there. At the time, we were still doing COVID protocols where only one loved one could come with you for the labor and only one person could visit you at a time and all that. Um, my mom stayed with the baby in the hospital for, I think it was 10 days. And I stayed with her for like 6 days. Something like that. 3 to 6 days. I forget. I left earlier than my mother did. Why is my eyebrow acting like that? But, she stayed in the hospital for quite a while she withdrew from my psych meds, and they did all sorts of tests on her, and they initially refused to let her go home with the people I picked out until we um I wasn't the one involved in the legal proceedings, but something to do with getting the right paperwork from DSS and not informing the hospital of who the paperwork was about, because we were suspecting that it was homophobia that was driving them to not want to send a baby home. Um, but um, once we had the paperwork from DSS saying that the women who planned to adopt my baby since before she was born were allowed to take her home from the hospital. Once we got the paperwork all straightened out, we bundled her up, and by that I mean we put her in a car seat, and it had like this cloth cover that like covered the entire car seat, and we took her out into the parking lot, and I got to show her to her new mommies. When I had my son, I often had to remind my mother, who was there for her birth, that my daughter existed. Like, that I had a daughter at all. When I had my son, I had just gotten married. We had gotten married in May, and then we had the baby in June. And I looked up to my mother because she had successfully raised me and my sibling. I did not realize the woman who raised me and my sibling ceased to exist sometime between my ages of 13 and 14. And I was dealing with someone entirely new from age 14 onward. And you may think that's some extreme language to be using about my mother, but I'll put it this way. My mother had quit cigarettes for numerous years in preparation for having my sibling and then me. She stayed off cigarettes until I was about 10. After after she started smoking again, she would smoke in the car with us, but she would hold it out the window. But she would never smoke inside a house around us. She always went outside to smoke. Then she divorced my stepdad. She went to rehab for alcoholism. Well, she went to rehab and then divorced him, but she didn't come back from rehab, and she ended up being gone so long that the man she had just divorced had to adopt us because he was no longer legally able to take care of us unless he adopted us. Because he was no longer married to our mother. But he had physical custody of us after the divorce. He was the one taking care of us. My mother had abandoned us. We didn't realize that anything was amiss until I went to the psych ward one night and they refused to let my father go home with my sibling. Like, my sibling had come to the hospital with us because we didn't have a babysitter at 2 a.m. And they were refusing to let my father take my sibling back home after I was admitted because he was not legally our guardian. And they said that we needed our mother to come in person and prove that it was okay for him to take Tab home. She ended up working her magic and convincing them that faxing over her details would be sufficient. And after that, he legally adopted us, but was not allowed, per our mother's request, to tell us that we had been adopted. All he could explain was that he had legal custody. My mom remarried when I was 13. I was there. My sibling was there. I have photos. In fact, I inherited the outfits we wore. Let me go grab them. I'm back. Don't ask me which one's which. Let's see here. I believe this one is a man's. So my father's, um, Robin. My father, Robin Love. He was Cherokee. Well, at least he claimed to be. Now I have no reason to doubt him. Besides, the history of white people claiming to be Cherokee in order to do land grabs. But if he wasn't Cherokee, he was at least Swi and raised Cherokee. And if I'm not mistaken, oh, this is definitely his. If I'm not mistaken, these are called ribbon shirts. No? Was this his? This is too small to be his. He was thinner at first, but I think this might have been his buddy Bob's. This was Bob's. No? Was it? Bob was a big guy. I don't know. I don't know who any of this belongs to individually, but this is what was worn during the wedding between my mother and my second stepfather. I believe this is the wedding dress itself. This is what my mother wore. And if I'm holding it disrespectfully, I truly do apologize. I was not given instructions. They did not expect to pass away when they did. It's got these neat tassels. What is this made of? Some sort of braided fiber, but I hate to say it, but I think this is synthetic. This looks like a synthetic fiber. Huh. And then we've got this one. I don't know where I'm going to display all these. Where are they? Should I donate them to the museum? Should I save them for my next wedding? I might do that. Yeah, I might do that. But yeah, we wore these outfits. I bet I could pull up photos and show you. Let me do that real quick. I spelled marriage wrong. You may be wondering how. Can you see that? Oh, it actually worked! Hi! Miss Ma'am? Yeah? Come here. Come on camera. Yeah, as you can see from the photos, I don't know who was wearing what, besides my mother wearing the dress. But there's my mother, there's Robin, and there's Bob. Let me see if I can find a photo of myself. This is before I came out as trans. I had to zoom in to crop out my sibling because I don't have their permission to show them. But yeah, that's me. So yeah. That was back when I would cut my own hair. I did a pretty good job. I also bleached it myself using peroxide. Um, he was not a good father. Not to me, anyway. And judging by his son not collecting any of his belongings after he passed away, except those that had value, like firearms, um, worth hundreds to thousands of dollars. Robin was not a good father to me. Um, as far as I'm aware, I've never pretended otherwise. When I was still 14, I moved in with them in his trailer that was dilapidated, like I mentioned. I got the room with the rotting floor. Um, I had a computer, and I was forced to share it with him, even though he had a laptop, simply because it was placed at the desk, and he wanted to use the desk. This was back when I started my YouTube channel. In my early videos and on the Rinbasa Og channel, you can see videos filmed in a double wide trailer. I think I was 15 or 16 when we moved into the house. So when I was still 14, my mom was at work one day and Robin came to me and he said, I wasn't looking to raise another kid, but here you are. So I knew even if joking, I wasn't welcome. No, there was something about me that we have yet to diagnose that may or may not be Williams syndrome, a chromosome deletion, that caused me not to perceive people's judgment of my identity and not to perceive bullying of the verbal variety as a threat and to see physical bullying as a challenge. So I came out as trans, knowing that my father would not accept me, because I didn't care. I knew that the school would be confused, and I would meet people who were taught hate, and I came out anyway. In fact, I came out as a boy without being sure if I was a boy or not. And I was very open about this fact. I would tell people, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm a boy or not, but I'm pretty sure I'm not a girl. So I'm trying out being a boy, and I'm going to see how it goes. And if I don't like it, I can just go back to being a girl. And I cut off all my hair and changed my whole wardrobe and started calling myself Ronry and Joseph. And so did the school. They called me Ronry. And when I changed my name to Joseph, they respected that too. The first time I ever hinted that I was non-binary, I think I was still 15, and a kid at school said, I refuse to call you Ronry because you're a girl, so I'm not going to call you a boy's name. And I said, Ronry is a name I made up myself. It is neither male nor female. And he said, oh, so it's just a nickname, independent of your trans identity. And I was like, yes. Well, he didn't say it like that, but you get the idea. He said, oh, so it's not a gender thing. It's just your nickname. And I'm like, yes. Regardless of what my gender ends up, I am Ronry. I've never felt like my birth name. Foreshadowing. So yeah, from the get-go, when I came out as trans, I was prepared to name myself something unisex in case my gender was more complex than just a binary trans man. And I was already out as bisexual. I came out as bisexual when I was 9 years old. And a lot of people ask me, what was it that made you aware of your sexuality at such a young age? And I tell them, Final Fantasy 12. Did you see Fran's ass? That is a good ass. I would pick her and have her be the character I control on screen just so I could watch her from behind. You know? So I was very aware that I was attracted to women. However, I was also boy crazy. So it wasn't like an all or nothing kind of thing. It was just, I saw people as attractive, not regardless of their gender, but yes, regardless of their gender. It doesn't matter what gender you are, I am attracted to all genders. However, my attraction to you is dependent on what gender you are as an individual. So, for example, my ex-wife and I did not work out because after we were married, she came out to me as a straight individual. And I was like, no, 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 no. I will not be in a straight marriage. I am a lesbian. I am a gay man. I am not attracted to you in a straight way. You know? So, I was married to her under the assumption that she was on Grindr because she was gay. Or queer. And she was, happy to tell me she was bisexual. Or no, pansexual. She used the word pansexual. Right? But then when I explained to her that because my gender shifts so often, I am so many different genders that I am gay in all directions, I said, just like you. And she said, I like to think of myself as straight in all directions. And that is when I knew it was not going to work out. But, when I was younger and first came out as trans, I wasn't really, I was only 14. I wasn't an expert on gender. But I knew there was something different about me. And I was looking to figure it out through experimentation. I guess therein lies some of the emotional incest. Because my mother should have been educating herself on the topic, and instead I had to educate her myself, often coercively, as one would to their child. I knew when I was younger, not a lot younger from now, but I want to say when I was 22, 23, I learned of the term parentification, and I finally had a name for what I had gone through. And granted, what I went through was much more mild than what a lot of people go through when it comes to parentification. It was nice to have a label to describe that the dynamic in my family was not healthy, and it was normalized for children to be relied upon like adults. it, it was it was seen as a virtue that I was able to give adult advice on what to do with their relationships and their lives and their parenting situations. My ability to give advice was seen as a virtue of intelligence, that I was very wise beyond my years. Nobody saw that as a red flag. And with my mother's passing goes any chance of me figuring out the names of the babysitters that did to me what they did. Maybe that's a blessing too. I'm gonna address the tiny little elephant in the room. I am wearing a short. I did not plan to wear it for this video. If you have been paying attention to the past several days that I've been posting, I have been re-wearing this shirt for a couple days now. And I'm probably going to change by the end of this video before I do my makeup or after I do my makeup. I don't know. But um I've mentioned in a previous short that one of my stepdads committed incest against me. And I was later included in the inheritance. And that is how I bought all of this. All of this. It was the guy who adopted me. I went no contact immediately. And don't worry, it wasn't in person. Like I said, none of my parents ever had physical sexual contact with me at any point. I was 19. I was facing occult ritual enslavement in a micro-cult that was an offshoot of a cult that I recently found was much larger than I expected. While I was still in the slavery phase before the commercial transaction began, I was 19. Me and my owner, we went on vacation to her parents' house in Virginia, near where I live now. And I left my phone behind and did not notice until we were hours down the road on our way back to my adoptive stepdad's house where we were living at the time. We get back. We arrange for my mother to pick up the phone and mail it back. So it ends up in the mail on the way to my adoptive stepdad's house. Within the few weeks that it takes for mail to arrive, I decided I could no longer stay with him because it was too bad for my mental health. I moved in with my biological dad, who I had recently moved out of. But I moved back into his apartment with my owner, and we lived there for a while. My phone arrived at my adoptive stepdad's in the mail, addressed to me. He opened my mail. There was no pin or anything, no face lock, no finger lock, nothing on the phone to prevent him from turning it on, opening it, going through anything he wanted. Because I trusted him not to. He went through my messenger conversations. One of my other partners, who had received intimate photos of me with my owner, was on my Facebook Messenger, and he pulled from the conversation one of the intimate photos. Then, on his own messenger, he messaged me. He said, "I have your phone." Then, using my phone from my messenger, he sent himself the intimate photo. This caused quite some confusion. I was first just waking up when I opened my messenger conversation. I see a message from my dad. I open it. I see that my messenger has sent him an intimate photo. I think maybe it's a mistake. Maybe I rolled over in my sleep and did it. Or maybe one of my alters did it. Or what if one of my owner's alters did it? That one I found to be most likely. So I asked my owner, who is tech savvy. She was a gray hat hacker, or is a gray hat hacker. I asked her how to figure out what device forwarded the photo. And she does that for me. And she finds the device that it was sent from was from my phone, which was not in my possession, that my father, the adoptive stepdad, had just confessed to having. She said she checked the location that my device sent the photo from, like the physical location, and it was sent from his address. I blocked him. I forget exactly what order I told people in, but I told my mother, I told my sibling. My mom did not say she didn't believe me. She said, "Okay, honey, I will talk to him," or something like that. I called my sibling, and they accused me of lying and making the whole thing up, then accused me of getting confused that one of my alters did it, not my dad. They had raised their voice, and I was not getting through to them, so crying already, I hung up on them. Um, which I don't resent them for. Not one bit. In fact, psychologically speaking, I think it's the most healthy thing in the whole family did. Um, by healthy, I mean like normal psychology. Out of all of us, my sibling was the one who acted with the least traits of a personality disorder. So my sibling reaches out to my mother and says, "Did you just hear what I heard from Ronry?" And my mother said, "Yes, honey, and unfortunately, your father Ben confirmed that he did indeed send the photo to himself. He said that he did it to teach her a lesson. Me being the her." And with that alone, my sibling called me up and apologized profusely. Which is probably a huge reason why I don't resent them. And they immediately went into comfort mode to console me. Weeks later, the commercial transactions began. My owner started selling me to clients in exchange for cannabis and money. And through this, I got into heroin. We were still living with my biological dad, and my biological dad had... I just heard a vibration. That was so weird. My biological dad himself was addicted to everything under the sun. Except, well, he didn't drink alcohol. He was previously addicted to alcohol, so he didn't touch that. However, he was an IV drug user. And, he rented his he rented his apartment to drug dealers in exchange for drugs. One of the people renting a room there was a heroin dealer. This was before fentanyl was the more common thing to be addicted to. Heroin these days doesn't really exist. But anyway, he offered me some. Looking back, he knew what he was saying would translate into me understanding that doing heroin would make being trafficked more palatable and easier to bear. He didn't use those words, but that is what the what do you call it? Advertisement? That's what the advertisement entailed, was him telling me stuff that him having the advantage of age and experience, he knew that a young hoe just getting into the industry would think a certain train of thought in reply to what he said. And I tried it. Nothing went wrong. I go back to my owner and I beg to see the demon whose name starts with a B, ends with an L, and is 4 letters long. And she says, if I let him out right now, he will bitch slap you across the room. And I was like, I need to see him right now. I need him. And she herself refused to comfort me. And made it all about herself. I go back to the guy again, per her instructions. And I place an order. For the first time ever, I order heroin. And he says, yeah, give me $10 and I'll get it to you. So I thought I was getting 1, maybe 2 bumps. A week or 2 passes. I don't get a individual bag with heroin in it, and he keeps saying, yeah, I'll get it to you, I'll get it to you. Then he goes to give us some weed, and there's a bag of heroin in the bottom. And I'm like, finally. So I assume that, like cocaine and like weed, when you pay a certain amount, no matter the size of the bag, you're only getting so much potency out of that numerical value that you exchanged. I think that the bag being bigger means that it is cut with something weaker or a useless binder, like baking soda. Something that's not going to get me high, it just bulks up the bag. So I pour out the brown powder with a few white specks in it. And I split it in 2. And I make 2 lines that are each as long as my pinky. My owner does a line, I do a line. We start feeling kind of good. And then there's a knock on the door, and he's like, hey, can I have that bag back? That was for my next client, not you. And I was like, shit, how much was it? He's like, is it already gone? And I'm like, yeah, how much was it? And he said, that was $40 worth of heroin. And he lickety-split gets out of there. I will say, out of all the near-death experiences I've had, overdosing on heroin was the most pleasant. And it was an all-over body feeling. There were also spicy side effects, I guess I would call it, because this is YouTube and I can only say so much. Like, on its own, spontaneous. But I remember barely being able to stay conscious. I asked one of the other dealers who lived in the apartment, because the dealer in question had moved out at this point, and some other guy had moved in. But anyway, one of the other dealers that lived in the apartment, I asked him, how much heroin did I just do? Am I going to be okay? Something along those lines. And I forget exactly what he said. But he asked some questions and said that if I can't stay awake, I need Narcan before I go to bed. Because if I fall asleep when I'm in that kind of state, I might stop breathing in my sleep. So we try to wait it out, see if it'll just pass. And me and my owner both fall asleep. I wake up. I jolt up. I look at my owner. She's fast asleep, and honestly, her chest wasn't moving. And I waited for just a second, and I thought about it. I thought about how it would be really convenient to not wake her up and pretend that it was an accident that I didn't wake her up, and never have to go through another day of again human trafficking, you know? And then I woke her up anyway. And I said, if you want to go to bed, you need to take some Narcan first. So we both administered Narcan to our noses, and then we went to sleep. Somehow, we were fine. Somehow. I don't know how. But we survived without going to the hospital. After that incident, I'd never touched heroin powder ever again, and didn't touch heroin itself again for many years. I think the saddest part of the fact that I got trafficked the first time around wasn't the trafficking itself, but rather when my mother found out that after my owner got out of the hospital, I got back together with her. She practically disowned me. And then when I finally escaped, because my owner left me for dead, I had to sleep in a barn that didn't have 4 full walls without a tent, just an air mattress. Because my mom still wouldn't take me back in. Because her husband, Robin Love, was still alive, and he didn't want anything to do with me. I dropped down to 97 pounds. I was about 114 pounds when my owner left me for dead. And I dropped down further and further after they were gone. And then after hovering at 97 pounds for several weeks and wondering if this was my last burst of recovery before a downward spiral that would end in my demise, I gained a pound. And then another. And then another. And eventually I was 105 pounds. At this point, I was no longer living in a barn. But that would not be the last time that I escaped trafficking and lived outdoors, because my mother wouldn't take me in yet. No matter what I did, nothing would change it. It all depended on if her husband was alive or not. I didn't know that. I thought if I tried hard enough, I could convince her to take me back in. But I was worthy. Worthy of life. Worthy of shelter. Worthy of unconditional love. But she would rather me die than be single. So she waited until he passed away. After that, she still waited until she figured out that no amount of texting me, telling me how important prenatal care was going to change whether or not I went to the doctor. So she explained to the person I was calling my husband, who I now call my captor. She explained to him that I needed prenatal care for the birth of the baby, and that I would be back after the baby was born and adopted. And I was going to go back. At the time, I didn't know it was human trafficking. I thought maybe if I proved to him that I was worthy, he would be consistent with his love bombing and adoration. I remember how happy he was when I told him my mom wanted to buy us a restaurant for him to run. But eventually, he started talking shit about me where my family could read it. And that is where I drew the line. It did help that over the course of Christmas vacation and New Year's, my older cousin wormed their way into my head, convincing me that I needed to dump this loser who was 51 years old when I was 24. I wanted to break up with him in person because it felt wrong to break up with him over the phone. But my mom said she refused to fly him out to CB just for me to break up with him because it would be a really awkward plane ride home. And she felt like it would be meaner and crueler to fly him out there just to break up with him. So I broke up with him over Facebook Messenger and told him I was never going to come back to him. I can't tell if I am hallucinating or not. And it's not a visual hallucination. However, it is coming from that direction. Let me show you. I don't know if I can hear it anymore. Alright, so, after the cult left me for dead, after my owner left me for dead, I wrote a song called I Wanna Ruin All Your Favorite Songs. And it has a lot of meaning to me. One of the lines is, "The time ticks by on the watch we cursed." I see 4 letters. Wait, what? The time ticks by on the watch we cursed. I close my eyes and see 4 letters carved upon my brain. And I ask you why your symphony is so sweet to me when its melody is written with your lies. Was there anything I could have done to change our fates, to save our lives? Because I tried and everything I do just seems to be in vain. Anyway, you get the idea. The time ticks by on the watch we cursed. I close my eyes and see 4 letters carved upon my brain. Those are both hallucinations that I live with nowadays only occasionally, but back in the day constantly, as a result of the occult ritual brainwashing and drugs and hypnosis and all that I went through in the cult of BAAL. I don't want to say it out loud in case another survivor is watching. Saying his name can be a trigger. Especially if you were programmed to believe that you are possessed by him, such as if you're male, physically male, and destined for a role of leadership within the cult, you know? Um, anyway. so weird. I talked about it and now it stopped, and that's making it even creepier that I heard it at all. The the time ticks by on the watch we cursed refers to when I was in the initial stage of the enslavement, when they were still doing the ritual occult part of it. So the first 6 months of the year and 3 months that I was enslaved by them. The first 6 months were bizarre. And when discussing this with Google Gemini, it mentioned some French phrase that means madness of two. And that very much is what was happening. I was told I was destined for greatness. I was told that as the fiance of the devil, my marriage contract also came with an afterlife seated in a throne ruling over hell. Later on, they told me that this was a lie and that I would never be worthy. And they would toy with me, saying, if you do this, maybe you'll prove to me that you're worthy. And then I would do it, and if I met their standards sufficiently enough, they would stop giving feedback on how to do it better and finally tell me, you've accomplished it, but you're still not worthy. And at some point early on, in the first 3 months of the 6 months, there was a watch. It was pretty inexpensive. It was from Walmart, if I remember correctly. And it was black with gold. It was an analog watch that kind of ticks. And the devil demon, he said to me, the one whose name starts with B and ends in L and is 4 letters long, that guy, the devil, he told me that he would be watching me through the watch at all times. In the, I think it was 10 days, 14 days, something like that, that I had escaped initially, before my owner illegally started moving back in with me. So, like, while they were in the psych ward still, yeah, I got, I think I got shit-faced or something like that, but I was hanging out with Cheyenne, may she rest in peace, in my Section 8 apartment, and I took a hammer to that watch. I broke the face. I bent the hands. I bent the face of the watch. Then I flipped it over because it was still ticking. I demolished the plate in the back till it was bent. And then I demolished the screws holding it into place. And then I removed the battery and I continued to smash it because it wouldn't stop ticking. And eventually I gave up and I flipped it over and I saw that no part of it was moving. The ticking was not coming from the watch. There was no physical vessel that I could successfully destroy enough to get rid of this ticking. I'm sorry, I keep going silent and then suddenly pausing. Um, I I experience catatonia at times. And basically, what happens is I literally try to speak to explain to you that I need a minute, and my voice works, but my mouth doesn't, or something like that. I don't know how to describe it other than I go and it just doesn't turn into words. So I just pause, and then I stare at the floor for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I told you about the thing ticking because I could hear it ticking during one of those catatonic spells. However, this previous one that I just paused for, I did not hear it tick one bit. And it's still going. It is, yeah, it's still moving. And now the AC, the heat turned on, so there's no hope of hearing it now. But it was not making a noise this time. Half of me is saying that was the devil trying to tell me that he's watching me. And the other half of me is telling me that it's just a hallucination. It's just psychology. And that's what a good recovery looks like for someone who's been in this cult. Can you imagine what it's like for Christabel, the victim that came after me? She got told I was the perpetrator all along. The entire time she was going through it, she got told I was the one that started all of it. And then she reached out to me and she's like, I have a feeling this bitch was lying. And I was like, you were correct. This bitch was lying. And she's like, can I see your hand real quick? I'm like, yeah, why? And she's like, yeah, I agree. There's no way this could have happened. How long ago? Don't do alcohol. Makes it hard to remember a lot of things. Anyway, she reached out to me on Facebook and she's like, this entire time, what was the name I gave my owner in the previous? Yeah, Jay. This entire time Jay was saying that you were a cult leader who enslaved them and raped them daily. And here you are, someone who is using a wheelchair because of how thoroughly they abused you. And I was like, explaining to them how absurd it was, some of the accusations in particular of the physical violence that I actually was the victim of, and how ridiculous it was to accuse me of being capable of it. And so when I showed her, my hands are tiny. I am 5'4". My hands are tiny. They used to be tinier before I had kids. I I cannot choke a male person, like someone with male anatomy. I cannot choke them unconscious one-handed. However, a male could choke me unconscious one-handed, particularly before starting estrogen. So it just didn't add up that I was the perpetrator. And so she came to the conclusion on her own that the person who hurt her was full of shit. Really proud of her for that. However, she wasn't fully convinced that I wasn't possessed by the devil, and that I, unbeknownst to myself, was possessed occasionally and watching her, and she would end up having delusions about me. And apparently, at some point during one of these delusions, instead of reaching out for reassurance yet again, which I was always happy to provide her, unfortunately, reassurance was not enough. And she blocked me. I didn't notice at first. Either that or she deleted her Facebook entirely. You can, well, now that my Facebook has been nuked, you can't find her comments anymore, but on previous profiles, you can probably find her commentary on public posts. It's just the name Christabel. Just a few comments on Facebook. That's all she is now. Sad. The one person who truly knew what I had gone through. I miss her so much. And so that's why it's so important to me not to make fun of the survivors that have been in the political media recently. My mom let me go through that. I can't say for certain how long we were friends without actually looking at, a direct message chat history on Messenger that no longer exists or is no longer accessible to me anyway. But a good 6 months to a year is how long we were friends on Facebook before she just disappeared. And there were several times where I had to reassure her that she was not meeting people who were possessed by the devil. She was just seeing things that reminded her of our owner's altars. And that's all they were, was altars. Not demons. Not the king of hell. Just coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms that had an amnesic barrier as a result of child abuse starting before the ages of 6 to 11, I believe it is now. Um, it used to be 6 to 9, and then they were like, we are seeing it actually happen as late as 11. If the trauma happens at 11, that usually means that the lack of healthy attachment to one or more caregiver has been there all along. And so we see it present in people whose trauma began at as old as 11. But that's the cutoff age for developing dissociative identity disorder. So either she's faking it or she went through childhood trauma. And I've met her parents. Her father, may he rest in piss, was adamantly opposed to her transition. And we're talking about someone who right now is on estrogen. She's a lesbian. It's just, how about this? I'm not going to show you her whole face, but one photo comes to mind in particular that I can show you. Okay, I found it. She was pretty. She is pretty. Regardless of looks, regardless of behavior and misdeeds, regardless of evil or good or recovery possible or irreparable or not, she is a beautiful young woman who deserves to define her own identity, regardless of if society assigned it to her or not. And the way her father handled her gender variance when she was a child caused lasting trauma. So that when somebody stepped into her life and privately encouraged her gender variance, she was like putty in their hands. And that guy, I'm so curious about him. I want to study him under a microscope. I'm assuming there's one of two things. Either he had some brother that was into conspiracy theories, and then he got into conspiracy theories and found out about MK Ultra and decided to try it out, or what happened to the survivors who are in the political media these days happened to him, or his parents, or someone related to him who had access to him when he was young. And there is a chain of infection from leaders of the world powers, of the Hollywood sector, the billionaire class. somewhere between them and a small town in the mountains of Virginia. Well, going back further to her childhood, and this feels wrong to call him a child after what he did to her. Sorry. Some child infected her when she was still a child. That was in Tazewell, Virginia? Yeah, Tazewell, Virginia, which I think is on the border of West Virginia. That isn't far from here. Um, I'm probably walking distance from where her parents used to live, which is where we used to stay when we needed privacy. And we needed privacy to do ritual stuff before we got an apartment together through Section 8. Feels weird to raise my kids not far, a stone's throw from where I was trafficked, where I was enslaved. Yeah, here we are, you know? I'll definitely be cautious. I'll be very strict about sleepovers, you know? I don't care what gender you are. You have a friend over, you keep the door open. I'm going to talk about one particular trauma that only people with dissociative identity disorder and similar conditions can experience. Um, it's called system hopping, and it is a form of manipulation where there's two ways to do it. Cuddle me, damn it. I'm trying to teach him to cuddle me more. I don't know where this little baby went. She usually cuddles me when I talk to the camera. Anyway, what was I talking about just now? It's just, it's too big of a coincidence for her to be claiming to be. Oh, yeah, that's what I was talking about, system hopping. Um, System hopping is when they claim that they have an alter that is in your system, either by creating an alter that is based off of your alter, or by forcing you to go through a trauma that creates an introject alter who is based off of one of their alters, or off of them. And then you tell them that this alter is hopping from system to system back and forth and is independent from the body. This is scientifically not possible. So when they tell you that you are possessed by a demon that is named, and that this demon can possess other people as well, that is a form of system hopping. It's interesting that my owner accused me of being possessed by the devil when the devil in question himself refuses to possess a female body. At least he did at the time. But this is a man who enjoys lying. He loves getting away with it. If you ask him stuff like, when you did XYZ, were you secretly planning this overarching theme of Machiavellianism and deception and manipulation? Was that what was happening all along? Regardless of if that was actually happening, he would just say yes to claim credit for it. And then later on, he would say, no, I never did that, whenever you held him accountable for it. What's going on right here? That's better. However, that could go either way. Maybe he was actually doing all the things I accused him of, that he said, yes, I did that. Maybe I was right all along, and when he later was held accountable for it, he lied and said that he hadn't done it. You know? With an unreliable narrator, you will never know the truth. And you have to get comfortable with that. Closure comes from within. I used to not believe in closure, but I feel like I have closure in my life now. So it has to exist. I just unfortunately have to report back that it requires for your parents to fucking die. And then you'll feel closure finally. You have to own a house and land. Or if you're comfortable with it, an apartment. You have to be able to maintain a shelter and not worry about being kicked out of it. It's taken an It's taken an immense number of professionals and loved ones and facilities and friends along the way that no longer are friends, new friends who know me only as who I have been since I gotten sober from alcohol. And it took being believed. am really incredibly thankful to my YouTube audience who has seen the best in me and chosen to encourage it. Keeping my trauma a secret for years felt like living in two worlds, like living a double life, like being haunted. Like it was always in the room with me, but nobody else could see it. And when I would behave in weird ways, people couldn't see it still, especially if I refused to talk about it. And so they would come to weird conclusions that weren't true. I've learned to weaponize that. I like to tell people that my daughter got adopted when I was homeless before I tell them that I experienced human trafficking. Weeds them out. Living with my trauma and not feeling able to speak about it led me to drink, led me to not care if it destroyed my liver, led me to stop brushing my teeth. It led to a lack of creativity. It led to a lack of empathy, a lack of sympathy. It led to me having a chip on my shoulder, so big that I jumped out of a car. One I can't seem to get rid of, no matter how hard I try. You will not get closure from going back to someone who hurt you. You will get closure from cutting them out of your life entirely and thoroughly, and then hearing that something happened to them that prevents them from ever getting to you again. It can happen in a number of ways. They can pass away. Their country could no longer allow travel to your country. Their visa could get denied. What else? They go to prison. You put them in prison. That's a real fun one. What else? They get a divorce. Their husband passes away. And honestly, what gave me the most closure of all was makeup. I found out that no matter how ugly you try to make yourself, no matter how unappealing you try to make yourself, there will always be a pervert who is gross enough to be into you. However, if you make yourself look confident, and if you make yourself look aloof, that makes them not want to bother with you because they know better. They won't get a reaction out of you. They know you'll see through their manipulation. Being ugly won't stop them from raping you. Being alone will. So, how does this tie into parenting? Well, my mother no longer was the woman who raised me in elementary school by the time I was 14 and moved in with her. She smoked inside, and for a while I thought it was because I was older now. And then I had my son, and the rule was you don't smoke inside around him. And she did it anyway. What day is it? The 17th. Getting clean from meth feels so hollow. I know that sounds really random. My clean date is in 2 days because I don't remember the exact date that I last used meth. I just remember it was sometime in the summer and about a year before my son was born. I started celebrating 2 or 3 months after I stopped using it. It took that long to decide never to use it again. I got pregnant very quickly. So I was celebrating 3 months when I had the first pregnancy test come back positive. So to pick a random date, and that was in the summer before my son was born. I picked June 19th, which is Juneteenth, a previously national holiday. It celebrates when word of the Emancipation Proclamation reached enslaved people in sorry, not Africa, enslaved people in Texas, which kind of looks like Africa. Uh, um, sorry, that's a joke. I should not be joking right now. But myself being a former slave, I I remember the first time an altar who went into dormancy in order for us to survive the cult came out of dormancy after the cult was over. It was months and months after. And sometimes still to this day, we'll have an altar front and integrate for the first time who went into dormancy while we were in the cult or going through trafficking. I did not like meth anymore. And by the time I was in the second trimester, I no longer had cravings for it. I feel like I cheated, you know? I didn't use willpower to get over my meth addiction. It just wasn't convenient anymore. It didn't make me feel the way it used to make me feel. Even if the sensations were the same, it was like a performance. Like I was going through the motions and not actually enjoying it. It really felt like I was just reliving my trauma. And that's what I was doing with the person who is now my ex-wife, as opposed to, say, the guy who made me jump out of his car. The guy who made me jump out of his car, we got into that situation because of meth. He found it for me. I couldn't find it on my own. And then when I got kicked out of my mom's house later on, it was because some construction worker hit me up on Grindr. Said he would keep me up all night long. I said, you can't do that without drugs. And he says, I have those. And so I drove to his place and did not come home for 3 days in a row. And she figured out that I was doing the same pattern that I had just done right before jumping out of a car and testing positive for methamphetamine, while my blood alcohol content was at twice the legal limit. Not that I was driving, but, I jumped out of a car, He was driving, and I was that drunk. That when I arrived at the hospital, 90 minutes later, they took my blood, and it was twice the legal limit. So I really should have known better when my son was born. The person who is my wife now. No, the person who is my ex-wife now. I kept saying that it was a really bad idea for me to start drinking again, and she kept saying, no, go ahead, let's get some alcohol, and encouraging me to drink. There was one night my mom was out of town at a concert, and I asked my wife at the time, and I asked her, is it alright if I drink tonight? She said, yeah. So I got drunk, and the baby started crying, so I told her, hey, you need to go attend to the baby. And she flipped shit, threw her PlayStation 5 controller, stormed out of there yelling, drove off, didn't say where she was going, probably to her mother's house in North Carolina. So I called my mother and I asked her, what do I do? I'm drunk. And she's like, get a babysitter. So I got a babysitter. And because I didn't check out the babysitter's house before I had the babysitter take my baby overnight, I got put on the neglect and abuse registry for 2 years. And it looked really bad during the divorce that my ex did not get charged with anything. However, I was on the registry. I didn't get charged with, like child, like, I didn't get charged with anything that I had to serve time or anything like that. Nothing. All that happened was I was put on a registry so that if you looked me up for babysitting, I would show up. So I waited for 2 years before I started doing anything when it came to hello kitty boy. You want to cuddle? Okay, never mind. You're so pretty. Anyway, before I started working as a clown at birthday parties, I didn't want to be on the neglect registry. I did not want to be on the neglect and abuse registry while applying to be a clown at birthday parties. So I waited 2 years before doing anything of the sort. Initially, I was waiting because I thought I was going to be a babysitter. And I was like, nah, let's be a clown. And it was really fun. It's just, I don't want to be on my feet for hours on end. And that was most of the job, was just wearing makeup and being on my feet for hours on end. But yeah, I got put on the abuse registry for neglecting my child. Wow, my stomach just growled. I need to get some stomach into me. That is not the right word. I need to get some food into me. Um, anyway, my daughter and I survived forced abortions on the part of my captor. And it often wasn't clear that that is exactly what was going on, but now that I'm older and my prefrontal cortex is fully developed, that is obviously what was going on. He would force me to ingest chemicals. He would get violent if I didn't. Now that I think about it, all the times he did get violent, like, despite the fact that I had done whatever he wanted, through and through and through, and he got violent anyway, with the hindsight that he was trying to abort the baby, yeah, no wonder he was pissed. It didn't work. That's why he flipped shit all those times I couldn't figure it out. Damn. Cookies, why are you all the way over there? I want to cuddle. So after leaving a comment on a popular a popular short on YouTube, or Dr. Sarmeed or something like that. I forget how to pronounce it out loud. Samed? Anyway, he reacted to a video where a woman uh, takes a selfie video of her and her daughter, or her son, I forget, and says, "Me and the baby I tried to abort but failed." And I made an offhanded comment saying I survived forced abortions. And she turned 4 this year. And people are weaponizing my trauma to say that all abortions are evil. That undermines what I went through. It does not validate what I went through. Saying that all abortions are evil is like telling a rape survivor that all premarital sex is rape or whatever is evil. If you tell people that sexual freedom and sexual consent is just as evil as rape, that minimizes what they went through when they were raped. And if you look at someone who was trying not to abort their baby, and someone else tried to abort the baby but failed, and you look at that and immediately think that a mother of 3 who accidentally gets pregnant despite using birth control and now is seeking an abortion because if she has another baby, the medical costs of the pregnancy will cripple her family. If you tell her that her getting an abortion of her own free will because she already has 3 children to feed is just as evil, or if you tell someone who was raped that them getting an abortion is just as evil as that guy forcing me to try to abort my baby, then you're missing the point. He raped me. That's how I got the baby in my belly in the first place. It was a prophecy. A weird one, because it came true. The Mary Magdalene prophecy. I don't know what beef you have with that. Did you just make a noise at me? Oh boy, you stink, Peanut. I need to brush your teeth. You know that? What was I saying? Oh yeah, a prophecy. I achieved fauna shortly before I met the person who became my captor. And while I was going through the multi-step process of this psychotic break that we call enlightenment, God told me I was going to get pregnant. He said I would contract an STD from a drug dealer who was going to rape me. 2 different drug dealers raped me in the same weekend, and I contracted gonorrhea and chlamydia at the same time. A month later, after curing the STD, the hospital told me I was pregnant. I was a month along. I knew from the get-go who the father was, out of the two. And he denied it, and that was the only reason I doubted for 1 second whose she was. But the thing is, he couldn't make up his mind either. But the paternity test, the DNA test they did before he agreed to sign the adoption papers, proved that he was the biological father. The one who I had known from the get-go was the father. If I remember correctly, at one point, under his duress, I filled a prescription for the abortion pill. And then I refused to use it. Outright refused. Because you can't just swallow it. You have to let it dissolve under your tongue. And he pretended it was okay, and then later that bullshit ensued, where he would force me to ingest chemicals and I don't know why the police never did anything. Like, in the end, I know why. But towards the beginning, when I would call the cops on him for violence, why didn't they do anything about it? Maybe I told them not to? Maybe I told them I didn't want to press charges and that's why? Well, I've changed my mind now. I've changed my mind thoroughly now. There's a report already filed. I need to eat. I'll probably set up to live stream and get to cooking. But first I'm going to take a break. I will see y'all in the next one. Thank you so much for listening. Love you. Bye.